Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coffee with Craig, where we talk about all things firearms, firearms policy, politics, culture, media, you name it. We're talking about it right here on Coffee with Craig. So please take a moment, like and share the program so that your friends can know that this is where the conversation is taking place. Also, if you're watching us on YouTube and Facebook, make sure you hit that notification button. It's a little bell on there. That way you'll be notified as soon as we go live, and you can participate in the live chat as the program is taking place. Big news, folks, right now. Big news. The Firearms Policy Coalition has filed a new lawsuit. And this one is an interesting one because I know that some of y'all are out there saying, oh, it's about time. We've been wondering when this thing is going to come. And that's right. FPC has filed a challenge to the ATF's frame or receiver rule. Basically, this here be the Ghost Gun bill, the Ghost Gun Law. For looking to have that thing repealed. Although I guess Bill, and by the way, we have Bill Sack, Associate Counsel for the Firearms Policy Coalition with us. So I guess, Bill, calling it the Ghost Gun Law, well, that ain't quite right, is it?
No, because ghost guns aren't a thing.
And by the way, and the ATF doesn't, by the way, get to write law.
Yeah, that too. It's like they told us in law school, a gentleman's agreement is neither an agreement nor made between gentlemen. The ATF Ghost Gun Law is neither a law nor has anything to do with ghost guns because those don't exist.
Exactly. So do us a favor, give us a brief history about on the issue.
So as early as the last presidential election, it became clear that this administration was going to place a focus on what they call ghost guns, which for anybody who's not interested in inflammatory pejorative rhetoric, just calls homemade or self-built firearms. There is a history of building your own firearms and using self-built firearms for lawful purposes that goes all the way back to the beginning of the Republic. And remains, even after this new ATF rulemaking, 100% lawful. But it has become something that apparently every town and the Biden administration have determined tests well in market research and scares suburban moms. And so they have gone on a campaign to get rid of ghost guns.
Well, you folks might remember, and it actually this concept, this term started all the way back in I want to say 2014 or 13, around 2014 or 2013, somewhere around there, with Ghost Gun de Leon and his 30 round clipazines. That's when the
it's
phrase,
a 30 caliber clip, Craig. It's a 30 caliber clip.
The 30 caliber clip.
It's very scary.
Right.
Yeah.
It was very scary. But just like his 30 caliber clip was made up, so are ghost guns. The number of videos and memes that just made fun of it were just hilarious. Anyway, it cracked me up. But the point here, quite frankly, is that this is an attempt to, in essence, redefine what a machine gun is, correct?
Well, it's redefining what a firearm is. So taking a step further back.
Oh no! Yes, right. I'm sorry. I was thinking of something totally different. You are correct.
Yeah.
Yes. So what a firearm is.
The ATF is, as any administrative agency is what's called, they're a creature of statute, and so what that means is that administrative agencies can only do what the statutes that create them authorize them to do. So in this case, Congress passed a law which defines what a firearm is, and then created the ATF and said, you guys are in charge of enforcing this. What the ATF has tried to do in the purpose or in the process of passing this new rulemaking is they've said, well, we don't like the definition of firearm, so we're going to change it. And we're going to redefine firearm such that it now includes all sorts of things that aren't firearms at all, because we really think that they should be firearms, and we would love to regulate some more things, like any firearm ingredients, which we now find scary.
You know, it's funny that you said it because see, here's where the confusion came in for me for just a moment was because I remember when we were arguing, we were talking about bump stocks, and people were like, "Well, I don't own a bump stock, and I don't know who would, so I don't care if they, let's just give them that." And I'm like, no, if we allow the ATF to redefine a firearm part that we don't like, just because we don't like it, if we allow them to violate the separation of powers and redefine a firearm part that we don't like and thus ban it, what's to keep a future administration from coming back and doing the same exact thing with a firearm part that we do like? And thus we have the 80% lower, which basically it's not an 80% thing, but it's really what it is it goes right up to the legal definition of what a firearm is and stops, correct?
Right, right. So when you look at the definition of a firearm, there are a few things that you need to look at. One, there's a frame or receiver of a weapon, or a weapon that is readily convertible to being a functional firearm. What the new definition tries to do is it takes two separate clauses in the statute, the frame or receiver section, which talks about, a frame or receiver of a weapon is a firearm, or a weapon which is readily convertible into being a complete firearm is a firearm, and mush them together and now say a frame or receiver that is readily convertible is now a firearm. Problem is the statute doesn't say that. So they're trying to create a test which has, I think it's 8 factors, none of which are individually dispositive. And basically they're taken on the whole to determine when any hunk of matter, whether it's plastic, metal, or otherwise, becomes readily convertible into being a frame or receiver. Lots of problems with that. And you'll see that there are multiple causes of action in our petition challenging this. But in short, what it seems to do, or what it aims to do, is take any number of non-firearms objects, and that's what we often refer them as, NFOs, non-firearm objects, or firearm precursor materials, and regulate them as if they were firearms. And the problem is that the ATF simply does not have the statutory authority to do that.
Well, now, where does that statutory authority rest?
It would rest with Congress. So just about any 5th grade student who has gotten a C+ or better in their social studies class knows that in this country, the 3 branches, and we have separation of powers, the legislative branch writes the laws, and the executive branch, which all of the administrative agencies fall under, enforce the laws, but they don't get to rewrite the laws. So the ATF, they can enforce the law that Congress wrote for them, but they can't redefine terms, and they can't change the law. And the problem here is that President Biden, as far back as the campaign in 2020, said, we're going to enact new gun control and we're going to get rid of these ghost guns. And if Congress doesn't do it, I'm going to do it myself. Well, courts, that's a clue, because he can't do it himself. And that's exactly what this lawsuit says, is that the unilateral actions of a presidential administration that didn't get their way in Congress is not how this works.
Well, and that's the point is, and we're seeing this, by the way, this is not just happening at the federal level. This is happening in states all across the country where you have attorneys general or governors who are deciding that I'm going to reinterpret something the way in which I want to, and I'm going to decide whether or not I'm going to be the one who's going to decide what this is going to look like. You've got you've got district attorneys who are doing the same exact thing and deciding these are the laws I'm going to enforce and the laws that I'm not going to enforce. It's a subversion of our separation of powers, which is clearly important. But they're doing it in such a way so that they can then go after a fundamental right to keep and bear arms. And once again, if we allow them to do it with this part, what's to keep them from doing it with any other firearm part?
Well, exactly. I mean, and that's one of the many problems with this new rulemaking, is that it has the potential to be applied so broadly that any hunk of material could be a firearm frame, based on the previously unannounced and undetermined whim of an unaccountable federal agency. And that should be really frightening to a lot of people. I mean, an unaccountable administrative agency that has the power to put somebody in jail, in a federal cage, because of a hunk of metal that on one day a federal agent says is not a firearm, and on the next day they say we have changed our mind for reasons that are secret, and you now go to federal jail and can sit in a government cage for 5 years. That's terrifying.
Well, yeah, and so imagine if all of a sudden they're able to do this once again for various small miscellaneous parts. All of a sudden, you have let's say you used to own a firearm, you've lost your right to keep and bear arms, you've surrendered all of your firearms, but you have a firearm part. Let's say you have a barrel still in your drawer somewhere, or they're stored away somewhere. You could now be a felon in possession of a firearm if they decided they were going to call that or somewhat what's the word I'm looking for? You are a prohibited person in possession of a firearm.
Oh, prohibited person. Yeah. There are lots of problems with that. There's also some significant problems with the idea of constructive possession in this rulemaking, because some of the most popular firearms, and especially the AR-15, is a purposefully modular system. The question of when you are in possession of something that runs afoul of the rules is really questionable. So if you have an AR pistol and you have an AR rifle, both of those are completely legal. That's fine. What if you take them apart and you have a 10.5-inch upper, a 16-inch upper, a pistol lower, and a rifle lower, and now they're all in the safe right next to each other? Do you own an SBR, or do you own a pistol and a rifle, or none of the above? The ATF doesn't know. They'll enforce it as they see fit based on your ability to fight it in the court. And we all know who they choose to enforce it against, which is the people least able and least likely to fight back.
And, with all due respect to rank and file law enforcement, a lot of times if they don't know, they'll either confiscate the firearms and arrest you and let the courts sort it out. And the problem is that oftentimes the courts know very little, don't really know enough about firearms to know what should or should not be actually, whether or not it should equal a constructive possession. And once again, at the same time, you're already in the system. You've already had to get an attorney. You've already lost your property. All of this stuff is very, very important. And once again, all of this stuff, when I look at laws like this, I'm like, even if you're not into home builds, this is important because they're going to come after things like triggers. We've already seen them coming after those. They're going to come after the various different things because they already look at an AR and they say, oh, it's a big, scary gun. And mostly it's because of the accessories. It's only a matter of time before they, once again, start just coming after firearm parts or the accessories that make it scary.
Yeah, I mean, really at the core of this is that there is a fundamental right to keep and bear arms. Now, as part and parcel to that, you can't have a fundamental right to keep and bear something if you do not also have an ancillary right to first acquire it. So in order to be able to keep and bear arms, you have to be able to get arms. And there is a historical tradition in this country of being able to acquire arms by making them for yourself. Now, the government is uncomfortable with that because they want to know where every gun is, and they want to know exactly what type of gun that you've got. And they want to be able to control the types of guns that you can get. They want to control how often you can purchase them. And they want to control and know who has what when. So by trying to limit the means of acquisition of firearms, which is the only reason that they're trying to do this now, is they're trying to ultimately get to the end goal of having the government be the only place that you can get firearms. Well, that's a problem. If the people's ability to own firearms, at least in part, is to be able to balance the power of the government and to prevent tyranny. Saying "Mother, may I" to the government in order to get firearms that are approved by the government for your use in order for you to defend yourself against the government doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
All right, so obviously you just filed the case. when are you anticipating that you'll have an opportunity where this will actually be heard before a court?
Yeah, so this case is going to move quickly. So the case was just filed the second week of August. The new receiver rule becomes effective on August 24th. So there's going to be movement on this issue before then, hopefully. There's going to be some movement because what the attorneys are aiming to do here is to prevent the enforcement of this rule before it takes effect. So in addition to our case, there are a couple other cases in other courts challenging the same rule. And collectively, we're seeking to make sure that this is enjoined before it becomes effective on the 24th. So you should see movement of it in the next few days.
Ah, perfect. We're not used to seeing quick movement on Second Amendment cases. Unfortunately, they tend to take a while to move.
Yeah, this is going to be a quick one, at least at the onset. And then once we know what's going to happen at like the preliminary injunction stage, we'll have a better idea of what the roadmap looks like moving forward.
Now, I know during this case, during this same session, there was also a case dealing with the EPA, which kind of dealt with this rule-making process. Do you think that case is going to play a role at all in this particular case?
Well, there are a couple administrative law doctrines that affect these sorts of cases writ large. One of them is called Chevron Deference. Chevron Deference, which was part of that EPA case, is a legal doctrine that the courts created that basically says that anytime an administrative agency interprets its own rules, there should be a strong deference to what they decide, which means that basically the court is instructed to put a thumb on the scale and agree with the administrative agency that is interpreting and thus enforcing its own rules. Well, obviously, the administrative agency is always going to find in favor of itself. And so Chevron deference creates a pretty strong thumb on the scale against anybody trying to challenge any administrative rule. So that's definitely going to be important. Another kind of broad administrative rule doctrine that's important to keep in mind with this one is called the Non-Delegation Principle. And that goes back to the separation of powers idea, which is that Congress exclusively has the power to legislate in this country, and they cannot delegate that power. They can't transfer that power to an administrative agency. Congress is the one that has to make these rules. They can't say, ATF, you figure it out. They have to make the rules. And they have to provide a clear set of guidelines for the ATF to employ. So we'll see the courts for a long time were very, very liberal in allowing Congress to defer a lot of the decision making when it comes to the enforcement of these statutes to the administrative agencies, and given these agencies really wide latitude to use rulemaking to essentially create law. We're hoping that with the current personnel on the high court that we're going to start to restrict this non-delegation principle a bit and actually start enforcing it and request Congress to start to do its job. And the reason that's important is Congress is the politically accountable branch of the government here. Congress are the bums that we can vote out if we don't like what they're doing. We can't vote out the ATF.
So this Chevron deference, this isn't law. This is something that has been set through precedent.
Yep, Chevron deference is a court creation.
And without getting too much into a whole different topic, that's one of the things that I will give a lot of. I really appreciate that came out of this last session was, while I believe in this is Craig DeLuz personally. While I do believe in precedent as a way to help clarify situations, ultimately, you got to look at the letter of the law, the letter of the Constitution is written, and what was going on at the time in order to interpret this stuff. And I just think in these particular cases, too often what we're seeing is instances where the courts have created these precedent or these processes that have no real foundation in actual law except as established by the courts.
Yeah, the government loves to find in favor of the government. That's what we see over and over again. And Chevron Deference is definitely one of those instances where, lo and behold, the government said, we think that we should win a lot. That's a great idea. I think we should win all the time. And yeah, it definitely is going to take a court that's willing to undo some precedent, because Chevron's been around for a little while. But that doesn't make it right. So, sometimes it takes a court that's willing to step up and say, we're going to change things a little bit, and we're going to try to take things back to the way that they're supposed to be.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. How can folks follow the work that you do for the Firearms Policy Coalition?
Firearmspolicy.org is our main website. That'll take you to our homepage where you can sign up, become a member, send us lots of money that we can turn into lots of lawsuits. If you want to check out the legal team's work directly, you can go to fpclaw.org. There you can see all of the cases that we're involved in on behalf of the people. We're in 40 some odd, maybe up to 50 active pieces of litigation all around the country at this point. On fpclaw.org, you can see all of those cases listed chronologically by filing, what has happened recently, as well as by searching geographically and see what cases we're involved in your neck of the woods.
Excellent, sir. Thank you so much once again for all of the work that you do on behalf of gun owners of these United States, or those who are just maybe even one day would think about owning a firearm here in these United States. Man, FPC would not be what FPC is without you folks over there handling the legal stuff for us.
Well, we certainly appreciate it.
All right, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bill Sack.
Thanks, Craig.
All right, folks, you've seen all the work that goes into it, all the legal work that they put into this. They don't just file lawsuits, but they file friend of the court briefs. There's a 2A hotline where if you feel like your rights have been violated, where you can send us information about it and we can look into it for you. There's tons of places, tons of things and work that goes on here at FPC. And by the way, that's not even to mention the work that we're doing in DC as well as in legislatures across the country. Once again, fighting to keep bad laws from becoming law and to trying to, help good pro-Second Amendment laws to actually become law, protecting our right to keep and bear arms. But these things do not happen in a vacuum. They happen with your support. So what does that mean? It means you need to support the Firearms Policy Coalition. How do you do that, Craig? Well, I'm glad you asked that question. The first thing that you got to do is join FPC. That's right. Join FPC. Let me get there. There we go. By joining FPC, all you got to do in order to do that is you go to joinfpc.org. That's joinfpc.org. And then, or you can follow, by the way, the join link in the description to this video. At that point, you're supporting the work that we're doing. And I always like to tell people, you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. Don't be part of the problem. Become a member today. Now, the other thing that you can do to support the Firearms Policy Coalition is to go to FPC Gear. That's right, fpcgear.com. It is the place to go and get all of your Pro 2A swag. We're talking t-shirts, we're talking tank tops, we're talking hoodies, all sorts of different stuff that you can go there and find and purchase. And the best part is every dollar that you spend will go right back into the fight for our right to keep and bear arms. Which basically means you can support the Second Amendment and you can look good doing it. That's fpcgear.com. All right, that's going to be it for this edition of Coffee with Craig. We very much appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate you liking and sharing the program and encouraging your friends to do the same. Remember, this is a fight for our civil rights. Got to use them or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.